Now, this building will be familiar to most people, the GPO, General Post Office. And as a tour guide here in Dublin, I'm used to walking by and hearing people describe this building as the birthplace of the modern Irish Republic. Now, that's been starting to irritate me over the last couple of years, because I have to ask the question, what exactly is a republic? And if you look at it in any way, then I think you come to the conclusion that whatever else Ireland is, it isn't really a republic, only in name. There's really two traditions of republics. In the European tradition, especially in France from the 18th century, the French Revolution, to create a land of liberty, equality, fraternity, get rid of the old aristocratic elites and make a society where anyone can reach the top if they're capable enough. Or you go to America, you have American republicanism, the idea of European settlers getting away from oppressive governments, getting into the interior of the country and living free from autocratic rule. That's American republicanism. If you look at either category, well then I'm afraid Ireland doesn't really fall into either category. I think Ireland is a third type of republic. I think Ireland's a republic because our next door neighbour and former conqueror, Britain, is a monarchy. And if the opposite to a monarchy is a republic, then we'll be a republic, and that's what we are. And I think that keeps most people happy, but I don't think it's good enough. I don't think it works, and I don't think it's ever worked. I think since independence, Ireland has been ruled by an elite, an untouchable, unaccountable elite. We have our own self-regulating professions. Nowhere else in Western Europe is that tolerated. And our elite are not subject to the same laws of everybody else. Ireland has become a country where there's two sets of people. There's two sets of laws. The laws apply to most people, but the elite, the laws do not apply to them. And by God have we seen that over the last 2 or 3 years in Ireland. I think for a lot of people, history ended in this building in 1916. And then a few years afterwards with independence in 1922. After 700 years of struggle from Britain, we were independent. We would ride off into the sunset happily ever after, and our own elite would take over and they would look after the rest of us. And as I say, we live happily ever after. As you can see, folks, I'm afraid it hasn't worked out that way at all. I believe the correct word for Ireland is this. To describe Ireland, I believe we're a kakistocracy. Now this is a Greek word, folks, and kakis basically means rubbish or dung or crap. A kakistocracy is a country ruled by the most stupid and most corrupt and most incompetent people, and I'm afraid Ireland qualifies as a kakistocracy. It's not a republic in any meaningful term or use of the word. 90 years after the rebellion in this post office, we have had 4 generations of people having to leave this country. It happened in the 1930s, it happened in the 1950s, it happened in the 1980s, and here we are again. The best, the brightest, the cleverest, the most capable young people in this country have to leave because there are no jobs, there is no place for them. Either that's an accident or it's our kakistocracy, because if you are stupid and corrupt and incompetent and in charge of a country, you are more than happy to see the brightest and the cleverest leave. If they go, that's good news for you. If they stay, that's trouble. I believe that what's happened in Ireland over the last 2 or 3 years has been almost inevitable. When you're ruled by stupid people who simply are not prepared to plan for the good of the country, it's no surprise that you hit the economic crash that we have had. However, I believe we are now being asked to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I am not prepared to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It doesn't work. It's never worked. It's failed repeatedly. I want a new Ireland. I want a proper republic. I want a country where the laws apply equally to everyone, where those who mess up are held accountable, where those who are bright and clever and intelligent can make it to the top where they belong. I want to see a meritocracy, and I want to look across the North Atlantic to to the island of Iceland. Their politicians screwed up as well, and their politicians are going to be put on trial for charges broadly that can be defined as economic treason. When I see that happen in Ireland, then I'll know that I live in a republic. Now, this is our Parliament, Leinster House. For some reason I wanted to show you Leinster House from the back, the rear view. I don't know why that is, but I just did. A few stories I want to tell you. In early July, I was taking a group of Indians around Dublin, and I showed them our Parliament, and I said that our politicians were now on holiday until late September. 3 months holidays. How can you run a country and take 3 months holidays, they asked. I didn't actually have an answer to that question. Earlier this year, Mary O'Rourke, veteran politician, the mammy of the house, told a story where she was settling down for Christmas dinner in the Lenihan household in Athlone in the Midlands of Ireland, and in mid-afternoon on Christmas Day a lady knocked on the door seeking assistance in filling out a passport application form. In summer of 2000, I was living in a flat in Phibsborough. I got a knock on my door at about 9 o'clock in the morning. It was the Taoiseach, Bertie Ahern, my local TD. He wanted to know if there was anything he could help me with. I explained that if my neighbour's hedge was too tall, I'd simply ask my neighbour himself if he wouldn't mind cutting it down a few inches. In other words, I wasn't into this thing of my local TD, especially if he was the Prime Minister, getting involved in every piece of trivia in my life. A couple of years later, in November 2002, the River Tolka flooded on the north side of Dublin. Many people will remember the famous photograph of our Prime Minister, Bertie Ahern, standing in the River Tolka at 4 o'clock in the morning. The thing I remember is that people like the Office of Public Works and Dublin City Council had issued a number of reports and warnings in the years before the flood, saying it was very likely to happen. Nothing was done about those reports. Nobody cared about that. But everybody remembered that at 4 o'clock in the morning, the Prime Minister put his overcoat and his wellies on over his pyjamas and stood in the river. That's great politics, but it is unfortunately a lousy way of running the country. This is what many of us use our politicians for. We ask them to look after us, to help us fill in passport application forms, get medical cards, maybe get our son or our daughter a job in the civil service up in Dublin. In many cases, we are simply asking our politicians to fight their very own state bureaucracy and give us things and rights and entitlements we should be getting in any case. It's not a very good way of running the country. It's not a very effective way. At the same time, it creates what we called in youth work learned helplessness. The idea that you basically don't do anything for yourself. You get somebody to do everything for you. Learned helplessness. It's like being a grown-up child. When you travel around much of Western Europe, one of the things that strikes you is that all over countries like Spain and France and Germany and Italy, local and regional government is very strong. If there was a council park or sports facility or playground or whatever arranged by your local council or your town council, they're not long in telling you, because they have real power, and if they do a good job you can re-elect your councillor or your mayor, or if they do a bad job you can get rid of them. But Ireland is one of the most centralised countries in Western Europe, the dead controlling hand of Dublin. It takes away all community initiative, which is a tragedy in Ireland, because this is one of the strongest countries anywhere in Western Europe for local and regional involvement. People like the IFA, the Irish Country Women's Association, Macra na Feirme, the GAA. Look at how well we ran the Special Olympics in 2003. In the last census, 12% of people said they were involved in a local community, voluntary or sports club or group. That's the highest percentage anywhere in Western Europe. And yet neither our central government nor our local government are effective There is a dead hand of Dublin crushing everything. And I'm saying this as a Dubliner myself. I think Dublin is terribly badly run, and I think the rest of the country is badly run as well. And I want to see us follow the example of Western Europe and give real power, whether it's through councils or maybe even local or regional assemblies in Munster and in Connacht, Dublin and Leinster, real power back to the people and make local people responsible for local issues.